So it turns out Anonymous Yakima, which is the supposed hacker group, or it's at least their Yakima chapter, which apparently now supports left-wing causes and politicians, well, it turns out that they threatened me a few months ago, and I didn't really notice until now. So let's discuss why. Now, some of my regular viewers, you're going to remember that a few months ago, last year in late 2023, we actually published the 911 call of the Yakima Mayor Deccio when she was actually trying to get the police in the city of Yakima to illegally intervene and remove signature gatherers, who she called far-right signature gatherers, who were actually collecting signatures for the successful Let's Go Washington initiative campaign. Now, the mayor was clearly in the wrong and doing the bidding of local Democrat and failed congressional candidate Doug White. Now, much of this information came out in later records requests where it was clear that she was just taking Mr. White's orders and then doing his bidding, and this is how apparently she has spent most of her time in political office lately. Now, Mayor Deccio, her controller, and boss, Doug White, the local Democrats, and then some of their attorneys, they all made a big deal out of the fact that the mayor gave out one of her personal phone numbers on which she apparently conducts city business. And this was included in the unredacted, uncensored 911 call that we shared at the time. Well, apparently Anonymous, which is supposedly a hacking group, which gained some fame in the past for doing things like hacking the Church of Scientology, the Federal Reserve, and other various corporations in the past, well, they got upset with me for doing this and exposing the truth. Or, to be clear, letting the world know the truth that Mayor Deccio wanted to hide but exposed herself with her absurd 911 call at the time. Now, why they have a local chapter supposedly in Yakima, I'm not really sure, and it still remains a mystery to this day. But conveniently, they were also close friends with the Democrats and the Yakima mayor at the time. So they posted this stupid threat on their Facebook page, and I'm actually going to read it here for you. And it goes like this. It says, "Attention Glenn Morgan, also known as We the Governed, it has been brought to our attention that you were doxxed, or that you have doxxed both Mayor Deccio and her husband. Either redact their private number or we will release not only your private number, but also your spouse's. You have 48 hours. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us." Well, obviously, the clown that posted this stupid threat was probably just a Democrat activist who was too much a coward to actually use their real name. And that is typical for these guys. But come on. A threat only actually theoretically works if the person that you're threatening know that you actually made it, at least in theory. Now, if I'd noticed this dumb threat 5 months ago, I could have at least mocked it back then. But instead, I had to stumble on it now, long after Mayor Deccio is mayor no longer. And of course, long after the signature drives for all 6 initiatives were successfully submitted to the Washington State Legislature, and 3 of which have now become law, and now the other 3 which will be voted on this November. Now, a lot of time has passed, but since I finally found out about this threat just recently, I just thought I should respond. Now, in their threat post, they first misspelled my name, which makes it harder for you to know that you've been threatened in the first place. Glenn, for me, is with 1 N, not 2. And then, of course, they lied about the doxing, which is common for kind of lefty trolls, but you can't really let the truth get in the way of their silly narrative. And as I've stated on many occasions, the mayor chose to put out her cell number on the 911 call, and her office provided this information to the public when it was requested. Now, I'm not aware if she's married or not, so I'm really not sure how or why this crew brought out her husband into it. And then, of course, the dumb threat of outing me and my spouses. Plural, I might add. I don't know why they think I have multiple spouses, but this is just particularly dumb, and it's obviously ignorant. The 48 hours expired 5 months ago, and I didn't even know it happened. Now, I'll give them more credit than their poor grammar would justify here, but if they actually carried out their threat, it was probably a different Glenn Morgan. And unfortunately for them, there are a number of people out there with my same name, and I'm sure some of these Glenn Morgans occasionally receive threats that were originally intended for me. So anyway, I've obviously had threats, real threats in the past, of course, and I've found that most of them are not exactly threats made by superstar geniuses. My favorite was a Democrat PCO who called from his home phone, and he left a voicemail threatening to kill me. Now, this was a genius move, and it really wasn't hard to get that restraining order back then. And even Como News covered that one. Of course, then there's always the classic poorly written penmanship and poor spelling and stick figure hangman or something kind of equally original, either with no return address, a black envelope, or maybe a homeless shelter address. Those are amusing at times, but often boring with just the continuous repetition. And I'll post a few articles I've written over the years about these basic and typical threats. I don't usually dwell on them much, and most of them I ignore, but since I posted a video recently about how somebody tried to bribe me first, so the Democrats were trying to bribe me, I thought that I would discuss the next phase of how the left usually deals with those who expose the truth about government corruption and corrupt politicians. They always shift into dumb threat mode, which probably works on people who are easily frightened or shy. But more importantly, I suspect the threats help them gain street cred with their political friends. I mean, who really knows? These really aren't the top flight members of society anyway, and nobody has accused them of letting logic get in the way of an emotional death threat. Now, back in 2016, I did force the Thurston County Democrats to finally renounce violence as a legitimate tactic to promote their political causes and goals. That was difficult for them to do, and it was the first time that they actually did this. But I was proud that I could actually help them take that first small step towards political redemption and back from the abyss of sanctioned political violence. Now, I'm not sure if they would still make that statement today, but renouncing violence for them is sort of a two-step forward, one-step back kind of process. But I was glad that I could actually help them down that pathway to peace at the time. So for now, I'll just use this dumb anonymous Yakima threat as kind of another example in an ocean of examples that when the left has no ability to reason or any ability to debate the truth, you will find that they usually devolve into threats pretty quickly, and those threats will always escalate. However, the only reason that they threaten us, those of us who are actually willing to expose the truth about them and their actions, is because they know that we're right, and they can't argue with anything that we say. If you start getting threats like this, be happy and know that you're having an impact. Maybe, if the lefties making those threats can start to spell correctly, which is just a symptom, unfortunately, of the bigger problem in the collapse of public education today, you might even find out that the threats exist in the first place. Now listen, if you want to make an impact or a difference, you probably can't do it secretly very well. I do often work with anonymous whistleblowers and then people who, of course, want to stay kind of hidden from the spotlight, and that's fine, and I understand. However, if you want to fix what is broken, if we are to restore freedom and liberty and expose the truth in government, at least some of the people who engage in this process are going to have to be public and unafraid of speaking up. Now, I realize that isn't for everyone, but it will need to be the path for some of us if we are to fix what is broken in our state. We can't fix what is broken secretly. It will ultimately be public. We will have to show up if we want to impact the future, because as I always say, the future does belong to those who show up.